The oligarchs which control America and which really do control every single free country are making moves. And these moves are planned. They are very, very difficult to come back from, and they are most certainly not democratic. And while the oligarchs, the political elite, are operating and are furthering their plans in real time, which is causing irreparable damage to American families, irreparable damage to the actual fabric of society of America, we have talking heads on the right, on Fox News, on Twitter, and all we can seem to talk about is who's going to run in 2024. Is it going to be DeSantis? Is it going to be Trump? Is it going to be someone else? Do we still think that there's ever going to be a great guy, a great Republican who cares and loves Americans in the Oval Office ever again? Call me cynical, but I think that the combined forces of open border and amnesty immigration policy, election fraud, as well as the very undemocratic methods which the political elite are using are going to be a bit too much. At the very least, I think it is enough to ensure that if we ever do get another Republican president, it is going to be someone like Marco Rubio, like Jeb Bush, who is serving at the leisure of the swamp, someone who's already owned. But what's the plan? Why am I talking about this right now? Well, the UN has recently come out with their most recent apocalyptic bombshell report on climate change, which means climate change lockdowns. This is the new savior among the World Business Council, which includes essentially every single major corporation in the world. It is the darling not only because it solves this climate crisis, but also because it just so happens to fall in line with all of the tenets of the Great Reset. What's the economic impact of lockdowns that we witnessed in 2020? Massive economic harm to small businesses, massive economic harm to small American families. The average American is beaten down and become dependent on all of their goods, all of their resources to corporations. The key point of the Great Reset is to shift the world away from shareholder capitalism into stakeholder capitalism. Stakeholder capitalism, which essentially means that the entirety of the free market should be dominated by a group of corporations working closely in sync with each other. But in stakeholder capitalism, you don't understand, because corporations, they're supposed to be ethical, they're supposed to care about humanity, and they're supposed to work with the world leaders of this new globalized world, because, by the way, America isn't going to be a superpower. There's no superpowers. It's a globalization. They're going to be ethical and work towards a better future with the new leaders of the world. So more lockdowns, because everyone needs to be taught how the new world works. Let me take this time for a little aside into environmentalism and climate change. The pillars of American culture and what makes America America are, in my opinion, frontiersmanship, rugged individualism, transcendentalism. All of these things, nature is at the forefront, and it is the unity of nature and man. The antithesis of climate change narrative is not joining forces with corporations, oil corporations, whatever industry that wishes to pollute and destroy nature. And I will be damned if I let a bunch of city-dwelling communists who have never in their life touched grass claim the ties to environmentalism over a bunch of people who actually live in nature. Back onto topic. Through manufactured crisis, we find extreme emergency powers being used, which at the end of the day are just tyrannical laws which infringe upon liberties. And it is done so with manufactured consent, with absolute and total media propaganda and brainwashing across the board. All dissent is censored. And what is the result? So this is an insane video. From France, and it's insane to think that this is actually happening. But this is the reality of what these emergency powers, in order to enforce these plans, consist of. The new reality. And the question, of course, then is who is to blame for allowing it to get like this? And the first and most obvious choice is the government, the oligarchs. It's their fault. They are to blame for being tyrannical. Some would blame the people who are sitting there and allowing this to happen for compliance with what they know to be tyranny, allowing and accepting the trespasses against them. But what Republicans don't like to talk about very much is the final person to blame is the police for enforcing this. I've always said that backing the blue when the blue doesn't back you is absolute lunacy. At the end of the day, in a tyrannical government, it will be a cop, a police officer, who kicks down your door at 4 a.m. and arrests you for a wrong thing. I'm not saying all cops are bastards, I'm saying all cops are humans. And as human beings, before we have any obligation to government, we have obligation to God, to natural law. We have obligation to family, to community, to our fellow Americans. And it's time to start acting like those sheriffs in Virginia who, when they were told by the government, we are now going to infringe upon the Second Amendment rights of Virginians, they said, well, if you want to do that, we're going to deputize every single person who walks into our office. It is time for state and local governments to be flooded and filled with patriots. It is time for state and local government to wake up and to remember that they are strong. And when the federal government hands down to the state some new tyranny, some new overreach, some new injustice upon a state, they say, no, not in my state. We do not abide tyranny here.